Fish Hotel, written by Lynn Markham and illustrated by Justin Sipiorsky. For as long as she could remember, Tessa had loved fish. When she went canoeing with her family, she spent the whole time leaning over the edge of the canoe watching the fish. During the second week of summer vacation, Tessa and her family went to their shared family cottage on Lake Catherine. She was so excited to spend a whole week playing with her cousin Hugo and watching fish at the lake. Hugo had promised to teach her how to snorkel, and she had been practicing in the bathtub at home. It was dark when they arrived at the cottage. Uncle Henry greeted them and helped them with their bags. Tessa shared an upstairs bedroom with Hugo, who had arrived with his parents a couple of days earlier. The two cousins stayed up late that night, whispering excitedly about all of their plans. The next morning, Tessa and Hugo woke up early and ran down to the lake together. Hugo helped Tessa put on her mask. The two of them sank down into the water, grinning at each other.
Whoa, it's a completely new world underwater.
Yeah, there's so many new things to see.
They both laughed at the funny sound of their voices coming up through their snorkels.
Where are the fish?
Fish don't hang out at this beach much, but they love the trees and plants in the water. See those poplar trees? Uncle Henry told us they fell in the lake this spring. Let's swim over there.
When Tessa reached the trees, the underwater world changed before her eyes. The open sandy area she had just crossed was like a desert, but the poplar trees were different. After a few seconds, a variety of fish swam out from behind the leaf-covered branches, including a group of crappies. They had shimmery scales, and she noticed that their speckles helped them blend in with the trees. They swam together and all turned at the same time like dancers.
Wow, they are so beautiful.
Then Tessa saw some minnows she hadn't noticed before because they blended in with the leaves. One minnow grabbed an insect off a leaf and munched it down. Lunch, thanks to the tree. Tessa pointed and Hugo nodded, smiling. Suddenly, the minnows darted behind the leaves. Tessa looked behind her and saw a largemouth bass swimming toward her. The bass stopped and stared at Tessa for a few long seconds, as if he wanted to tell her something. Then he slowly turned and swam away.
Wow, did you see that largemouth bass?
It was huge! And did you see those minnows swim away from it?
Yeah, the minnows and the little fish really need that tree for safety, so the big fish can't eat them for lunch.
I know. That tree is their home, a safe place for them.
Are there enough trees in the lake so all the little fish can find shelter?
I don't know. Let's see how many trees we can find in other parts of the lake.
As they climbed out of the water, Tessa noticed a spot along the shoreline where there was a slit in the ground where she could see right down to the tree roots. Tessa and Hugo peered down into the slit and saw the lake bottom, which was covered with roots, leaves, and small rocks.
Hey, look at that red eye.
Tessa looked closer and saw an olive-brown fish lurking among the roots. All of a sudden, a brilliantly colored fish flashed through the slit and then disappeared into a nearby bed of water plants. On their quest to find out if there were enough trees in the lake for all of the fish, Tessa and Hugo snorkeled over to a cluster of trees that included a gigantic white pine tree. The white pine looked very different than the fallen poplar trees they had snorkeled by earlier. Most of its needles and some branches were gone. They were standing in shallow water when they noticed a woman waiting on the other side of the trees. Hugo waved. She had a twinkle in her eye.
Hi, kids. Are you checking out our trees? Hi, Carol. This is my cousin Tessa. Yes, we're looking for fish. Welcome, Tessa. Well, you kids have come to the right place. The fish love these trees. Do you know the story of this white pine?
Hugo and Tessa shook their heads.
This tree grew taller than a 10-story building. My dad climbed it as a kid each summer to peek into the eagle's nest near the top to see if there were any chicks and to get an awesome view of the lake. 10 years ago, a big windstorm blew so hard that the tree crashed down into the lake. It was over 200 years old. When this majestic tree fell, we heard a giant whomp. and felt the cottage shake.
Tessa looked down at the trunk of the tree as wide as a refrigerator and tried to imagine that noise.
After being a home to eagles, squirrels, woodpeckers, and other animals for over 200 years standing up, it started a second life in the lake. My dad told me that there used to be a lot more trees in the lake, and the fishing was much better then. So I left this tree in the water to become an underwater home for fish, a fish hotel.
Tessa and Hugo smiled, imagining an underwater hotel with guest rooms and a restaurant.
But what happened to all of its needles?
In the first few years the tree was in the lake, the needles and twigs fell to the bottom of the lake, where water insects shredded them into tiny pieces. Then fungi and bacteria digested the tiny pieces and released nutrients, which fed the algae growing on the tree. See how mossy it looks? Water insects and their larvae eat the bacteria and algae, and bluegills come to eat the insects on the tree. Then predators like great blue herons, largemouth bass, and muskies come to feed on the bluegills.
That really does sound like a hotel restaurant with a large buffet.
Yeah, one that's open 24 hours a day.
The kids went back underwater, and a bluegill swam down from the surface. All of a sudden, something big came speeding after it. The bluegill darted under the tree trunk just in time. Both of the kids popped up.
It's a loon! Yes, they eat fish too. Loons live on lakes with lots of fish and clear water, so they can see the fish they eat for lunch.
Tessa looked around and noticed other trees nearby.
Did all of these trees fall in the lake too?
Many did. When you have lots of trees growing along the shoreline, some fall in the water every few years and become new fish hotels. Last year, a friend of mine who studies fish helped me make a bigger fish hotel by adding a few more trees in the water. He cut the trees in the winter from that hill by the road and laid them on top of the ice. Then, when the ice melted, they sank right where we wanted them. The group of trees we have in the water now are home to many animals. It also protects my shoreline from waves, so it doesn't get washed into the lake. But the best part is that now some of my neighbors are also leaving their fallen trees in the lake.
The dinner bell rang. While eating, Hugo and Tessa told Uncle Henry all about the different fish they'd seen during their snorkeling adventure, and when they were done, the three of them walked down to the lake together. "This afternoon, I'm going to clean up the yard and chop up that poplar tree that fell in the water over there."
No! Uncle Henry, the little fish need that tree. It's their home. It keeps them safe from the big fish. This morning, we watched them, and the largemouth bass would have eaten the little fish for sure if they didn't have a tree to hide in.
Lots of other animals find homes in trees in the lake too.
But that tree will get in the way of boaters. While Hugo, Tessa, and Uncle Henry were looking at the poplar tree and deciding what to do, they noticed a fisherman stop at the poplar tree to try his luck. Hugo pointed down the shoreline.
Uncle Henry, our neighbor Carol left the fallen trees on her shoreline to be a fish hotel. See it right there?
Well, okay. I'll leave the tree in the water then. People seem to like fishing there, and I guess the neighbors don't mind. I never thought about how leaving trees in the water helped fish, and I do want fish in our lake.
Could we plant some trees near the water so that there will be big underwater hotels for lots of animals to use when we're grown up?
Sure. 20 years later,